These are 4 bands from Seattle who changed the world and paid the ultimate price for it: Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, the Big Four of grunge. By the end of this story, 3 of their 4 frontmen would be dead, casualties of the very movement they helped create. But before we get to the tragedy, we need to understand how a remote, rain-soaked city in the Pacific Northwest became the epicenter of a musical revolution that would define Generation X. Seattle in the 1980s wasn't glamorous. It was, as Sub Pop founder Bruce Pavitt described it, very working class and very poor. The city's isolation from major music hubs like Los Angeles and New York wasn't a disadvantage. It was the secret ingredient. Without the pressure to conform to industry trends, Seattle musicians developed something entirely their own. The foundation was laid in 1980, when an impoverished college student named Bruce Pavitt started a fanzine called Subterranean Pop, armed with nothing but an X-Acto knife, a glue stick, and a box of crayons. By 1983, something was stirring in the Seattle underground. Bands began mixing metal and punk around 1984, with much of the credit going to the U-Men for pioneering this fusion. Interestingly, it was Green River's Mark Arm who first used the word grunge in print back in 1981, long before it became the defining term of a generation. The first official documentation of this new sound came on March 21st, 1986, with the release of Deep Six, a compilation album on C/Z Records. The album featured 6 local bands and was recorded for just $2,500 at Ironwood Studios by producer Jack Endino, who would later become known as the Godfather of Grunge for his work on countless seminal recordings, including Nirvana's Bleach. Today, you can find that album displayed in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's Seattle section. It was the birth certificate of grunge. But the real catalyst came when Jonathan Poneman provided $20,000 to help Bruce Pavitt launch Sub Pop Records in 1987. Their first major release was Soundgarden's Hunted Down single, followed by Green River's Dry as a Bone EP, which Sub Pop promoted as ultra-loose grunge that destroyed the morals of a generation. That catalog description would give the movement its name. The word grunge wasn't invented by the bands or even the label executives. As Jonathan Poneman later explained, Everett True used the word grunge, which he got from the catalog description of Green River's Dry as a Bone that Bruce wrote. None of us made up the word, it just became the tag that fit. Sub Pop's genius wasn't just in the music, it was in the marketing. They created a mythology around Seattle, selling the city's working class aesthetic as authentic rebellion. Flannel shirts, thrift store finds, and beat-up guitars weren't fashion choices. They were necessities born from genuine poverty. The scene was incestuous in the best possible way. Musicians had grown up together, been roommates, played in each other's bands. When Mother Love Bone's Andrew Wood died of a heroin overdose on March 19, 1990, his bandmates Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament didn't disappear. They found a surfer from San Diego named Eddie Vedder, recruited guitarist Mike McCready, and formed what would initially be called Mookie Blaylock, later renamed Pearl Jam. The rehearsal space that bound them all together was the Music Bank, an abandoned warehouse under the Ballard Bridge. Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Green River, Mudhoney, Temple of the Dog, and Mother Love Bone all practiced there at some point. Many lived there too, including Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains. Even Screaming Trees, often considered the 5th pillar of grunge, spent time in this creative crucible. Then came 1991, the year grunge broke. In September, Nirvana released Nevermind. In August, Pearl Jam dropped 10. In October, Soundgarden delivered Bad Motorfinger. Alice in Chains had already released Facelift in 1990, becoming the first grunge album to go gold. But it was one song that changed everything, Smells Like Teen Spirit. When MTV put it into heavy rotation, Nevermind started selling 400,000 copies a week. By January 1992, it had knocked Michael Jackson's Dangerous off the #1 spot. Rolling Stone declared Seattle the new Liverpool. The irony was brutal. When Nevermind hit #1, Kurt Cobain was living in his car. The success was intoxicating and terrifying. These were musicians who'd grown up in the underground, suddenly thrust into a spotlight they'd never asked for. The pressures were immense, and for some, unbearable.
Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of the enormously popular rock band Nirvana, is dead.
Kurt Cobain's body was found inside a garage apartment adjacent to his Seattle home.
Kurt Cobain struggled with fame, addiction, and chronic pain. On April 5, 1994, he took his own life in his Seattle home. 3 days later, an electrician installing a security system found his body. More than 7,000 fans gathered at the Seattle Center on April 10th to memorialize him. Michael Stipe of REM, who would later induct Nirvana into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, called Cobain lightning in a bottle. Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins called him the Michael Jordan of our generation. But all the accolades couldn't save him from his demons. The tragedies didn't end with Cobain. On April 5, 2002, exactly 8 years to the day after Kurt's death, Alice in Chains singer Lane Staley was found dead in his Seattle apartment. The coroner ruled he died 2 weeks earlier from a lethal combination of cocaine and heroin. He was 34 years old. Chris Cornell, Soundgarden's frontman with his nearly 4-octave vocal range, seemed to be the survivor. Soundgarden disbanded in 1997 but reunited in 2010. Cornell had overcome his addiction issues and seemed to have found stability. But on May 17, 2017, he was found dead in a Detroit hotel room after a Soundgarden concert. Another apparent suicide, another devastating loss. The grunge scene had always been about authenticity over image, substance over style. But that authenticity came with a price. These weren't manufactured pop stars. They were real people dealing with real pain, and sometimes that pain proved too much to bear. The pattern was becoming clear. As one journalist noted, all the great grunge frontmen are dead. Kurt Cobain, Lane Staley, Chris Cornell, Scott Weiland. The movement that had given voice to a generation's alienation and pain was consuming its creators. Today, Pearl Jam remains the last of the big four still standing with their original lineup intact. Eddie Vedder and company continue touring and releasing new music, with their 2024 album Dark Matter proving they still have something to say. U2's Bono recently called them the Grateful Dead of grunge, and in many ways that's exactly what they've become, the keepers of the flame. The Seattle scene still thrives, though it's different now. Local venues celebrate the genre through tribute shows and events. The Central Saloon, where Nirvana played their first Seattle show in 1988, is still there. The Moore Theater, where Sub Pop held their legendary Lame Fest in 1989, still hosts concerts. But something irreplaceable has been lost. Sub Pop, which once proudly declared it was going out of business. Since 1988, sold 49% of its shares to Warner Music Group in 1995. Bruce Pavitt, one of the fathers of grunge, stepped away from his own company, feeling it had lost its independent spirit. The grunge lexicon that Sub Pop employee Megan Jasper made up on the spot to trick a New York Times reporter became a symbol of how the movement was commercialized and commodified. What started as an authentic expression of working-class frustration became a marketing category. Yet the music endures. Nirvana received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023. They were the first grunge band inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014. In early 2025, the surviving members reunited for both a Fire Aid benefit concert and Saturday Night Live's 50th anniversary, with various guest vocalists filling the void left by Kurt. The Seattle scene gave us more than just music. It gave us a moment when authenticity mattered more than image, when outsiders could become superstars without compromising their vision. It proved that great art could come from anywhere, even a rainy city that felt forgotten by the world. The price of that greatness was steep, but for one brief shining moment in the early 90s, 4 bands from Seattle changed everything. And in the end, maybe that's enough.